February of 1940, the Calgary Sketch Club sent out a newsletter to its members. The newsletter addressed various club business, ranging from upcoming activities to comments on the club's finances and an announcement concerning a marriage. The newsletter is dominated, however, by a caricature featuring the subject of this paper, Laura Evans Reid. In this sketch, Reid stands before a large canvas pinned to 2 trees. Forest animals surround her, watching her at work. Shocked by what they see, a squirrel goes my word, a deer gosh, and a bear, or Reid herself, shouts, "There is no place for me." The caption underneath reads, "We have not had the pleasure of meeting Mrs. Reid of Vegreville, but imagine this to be the procedure in producing those big, vigorous paintings of hers." In the margins of Reid's copy of this newsletter, and you cannot see it in this image, she notes in pencil, "Isn't this adorable? I'm going to send them a self-portrait at the kitchen sink with the dishes piled high." So who is the elusive Mrs. Reid, and what could she have been doing that was so provocative and intriguing to the Calgary Sketch Club? So perhaps they were thinking of this work. Social Credit Meeting was exhibited at the Calgary Sketch Club the same year that it was created in 1937. In it, a group of people sit down, apparently looking up at a speaker who is out of view in the picture frame. Loose and open brushwork, the political subject matter, the colors, bright pinks and orange, would have certainly made this work atypical to Calgary viewers when it was exhibited. This could very well be the vigorous painting that the newsletter describes. It is not, however, big in terms of actual size. It's quite small, about this big. But none of Reid's work is actually big in terms of actual size. The largest that I've seen is about 2.5 by 3 feet. So perhaps the big in the caption refers to the impact that the work gives. The Calgary Sketch Club, where Reid exhibited Social Credit Meeting, was by no means a bastion of modernism. But what it was open and sympathetic to the experimentation of different artists. It was one of a number of organizations and institutions that were formed in the wake of the founding of the province of Alberta in 1905 with the purpose of fostering the visual arts. By the 1940s, the Calgary Sketch Club still offered one of the few public exhibition opportunities in the province. In a review of one of their exhibitions, a writer reports that the organizers were so dedicated to a sense of democratic fairness that they declined to privilege choice pieces as, quote, "that would have worked some hardship on those members who came for enjoyment," end quote. The result was that the Calgary Sketch Club exhibited newly practicing artists besides more established artists. A side effect of their non-hierarchical policy was that artists such as Reid, who were interested in modernism, were exhibited besides artists such as A.C. Layton, who were seen to be masters within their field. So this is an example of A.C. Layton's work. Layton was the one-time head of the Provincial Institute of Art and Technology in Calgary, which is now ACAD, and he was the founder of the Visual Arts program at the Banff School of Fine Arts. Under his leadership, the mastering of techniques such as drafting was seen to be of the utmost importance, as was the properties of tone, the balance between warm and cool colors, solid composition. As a newcomer or outsider, however, Reid did not have to be a slave to concerns such as tone and balance, but she did engage with subject matter popular in the Alberta art scene at the time, such as, say, the beauty of nature, or life in villages or in farms in rural Alberta. So these are some examples of her other works. So Laura Evans Reid did go to the Banff School of Fine Arts for 2 summers, and so these works were probably painted while she was there. So her representations of the Rocky Mountains were far more abstracted than that of her mentors or peers. This is Soup Kitchen. It's really quite unusual to find a work of this subject matter in Alberta, in the history of Alberta. So. And then Power on the Prairies. So her representations of life in the prairies were far less idyllic. So back to the question, who was Mrs. Reid of Vegreville, whose works were such a surprise to the members of the Calgary Sketch Club? This is a picture of her. And she's probably about in her mid-50s here. Reid was born in 1883 in Guelph, Ontario, and died in 1951 in Edmonton, Alberta. She began practicing art late in life. Before she married, she had an impressive career as a milliner, employing at one point approximately 20 women who designed and sold hats to the fashionable ladies of southeastern Ontario. So you know that hat here. She married Dr. Robert Reid in 1908, and 3 years later, the couple moved west to take advantage of open coast for the doctor. After a year of moving between different towns, the Reids and their 3 children arrived in Vegreville. It was where they would settle. So, for those of you not familiar with the small towns in Vegreville, I've added it to this map. So Vegreville is a small town, some 400 kilometers northeast of Calgary and 100 kilometers directly east of Edmonton. When the Reids arrived, the town had been incorporated for only 6 years. There was a mere 124 property owners, a service hub for the area's many farmers. Vegreville had grown over the years but has still remained small. Its population today is less than 6,000. When she arrived in Vegreville, Reid did not have any visual arts training. It was not until 1935, 23 years later, that she started to experiment in painting. Within 2 years, she was participating in exhibitions in Calgary and producing work that would have been nothing short of a challenge to prevailing conservative attitudes in Alberta towards visual art. She almost immediately began to engage with the Modernism, which was characterized in her case by political and social themes, such as soup kitchens and social credit meetings, emphasis on expression over description and an abstraction of her subject matter. As Mary Beth Laviolette points out in the exhibition catalog, Alberta Mistresses of the Modern, Laura Evans Reid was one of the first modernists in the province. Certainly, as the caricature in the Calgary Sketch Club newsletter demonstrates, her work seems to have provoked amongst her contemporaries a good deal of interest, though perhaps some skepticism. Reid's body of work can be divided into 4 different periods. A relatively short period from 35 to 37, when she experimented in relative isolation in Vegreville. A period from 37 to 41, when she actively exhibited in major exhibition venues across the country and engaged with representational modernisms in ways that distinguished her work from her Alberta colleagues. And then a third period during the Second World War, from 41 to 45, when her work was increasingly prolific, but when she was far less, increasingly politicized, but when she was far less prolific. And then a final period from 45 to 51, which is bracketed, of course, by the end of the war, when she, for example, had more time to focus on art, was able to access different art supplies, and her sudden death in 1951. Reid fell down the basement stairs of her home in October of that year and died 3 days later in Edmonton. So her career was a short 16 years. She produced a unique and compelling body of work which was widely exhibited and commented on by general news reporters and invested art writers alike. Yet her name is rarely mentioned in the history books. And of the Art of Alberta, which is where I work, which is very close to her home, her works are not in our collection, and they're not in the Glenbow Museum collection either. They are, I have to say though, at the University of Alberta, as are her archives, which was great as I was writing this paper. Part of the reason for that is because she played a leadership role within their extension program, which I will elaborate on later. And I just want to take a second to note that there is an important catalog that was produced by the U of A in '83, in which Diana Chown pieces together Reid's biography, exhibition history, and catalog raisonné through interviews and impressive archival research. This paper would have been a lot more difficult to write without it. The catalog, however, begins with a foreword by the director of the University Museum, which notes that Reid did not consider herself to be a professional artist. In the foreword, Reid is recognized not for her contribution to the visual arts in Alberta, but for her betterment of the pioneering society of rural Alberta in the 1930s and 1940s. I hope that this paper goes some way to improving the understanding of Reid as more than a Vegreville community leader, but a noteworthy player within the visual arts. For the remaining part of this paper, I will focus on the second period of Reid's body of work, from 37 to 41, the period when she was establishing herself as a serious artist and actively exhibiting. Drawing from archival documents, including newspaper articles, radio transcripts, letters, and essays, I will consider the ways in which Reid sought to frame her own work in comparison to how art critics and general news reporters sought to frame her. I will consider a couple of different factors which inform Reid's practice. First, the adult education movement, which brought extension courses to her town of Vegreville, and the related community art groups which sprung up in its wake. I will also consider the desire by H.G. Blythe, the artist and her teacher, to establish a regional art that was emblematic of a strong provincial identity. Glide attempted to position Reid as an exemplar of this regional art, though she likely had different ambitions. I will conclude with her correspondence with Garth McInnes, our critic at Saturday Night Magazine, and one of the few works that she created at the height of the Second World War. So during Laura Evans Reid's lifetime, anyone reading about her work would be hard-pressed to miss the fact that she was 52 years old when she began to paint. Her success became a good news story and was the subject of multiple newspaper articles with titles such as "Vegreville Woman, Talented Artist at 60." One wonders if the news was that she was an artist or that she was 60. The narrative that Reid would construct about herself to reporters and other interested parties always emphasized this late age in coming to painting, and her discovery of her own supposed innate aptitude for art. As she would write to her daughter, quote, "Art can't be taught or learned by a yardstick," end quote. In a letter to an interested reporter from Lethbridge, Reid frames herself as initially ignorant about making art. As she writes, quote, "I began painting at the age of 52, really began because I had, before that, never held a paintbrush or watched anyone paint. Hearing an art teacher in our local school say one day that she and one of the two of the ladies in town were going to do some painting that afternoon, I said, 'Painting? Do you mean pictures? That sounds interesting. Could I come watch you?'" And the letter goes on. In the many articles and reviews about Reid, she is framed not as a modernist artist, but as a sort of aged wonderkin, who, once her children were grown, was able to tap into something essential that teaching in fact could destroy. In one Guelph interview, a reviewer notes that H.G. Glide, her teacher, quote, "realizing her style to be original and distinctive, made no effort to mold it along orthodox lines," end quote. So given Reid's supposed naivete, how was she able to achieve what she did? And that she did form an impressive body of work and widely exhibited. Part of the answer lies in the community art movement in Alberta, which brought art instruction art clubs to Vegreville, but it also lies in Reid's own connections to central Canada and established art centres, as well as her savvy in exposing her art to a wider audience. Reid was not ignorant of art occurring outside of her immediate circles. She was not naive at all. For example, in letters to her daughter, she describes her joy at receiving various art magazines that were delivered by mail, once from central Canada as well as the United States. She delighted in the dismay that American abstract art brought to other members of the Vegreville Art Club. Reid was determined to take part in the contemporary art scene beyond her immediate community. She was determined to be an artist. In pursuit of that goal, Reid wrote to Donald Cameron, then head of the Faculty of Extension at the University of Alberta. Since 1912, the Faculty of Extension has been sending its instructors on the road to give lantern lectures in rural communities. In Canada, universities had been offering extension courses to adults since the 1890s and did so to broaden public access to university resources. As Perlin Reichwein and Karen Will note in their study at the Banff School of Fine Arts, which was one of the U of A's initiatives, these programs were both based in British democratic principles of extending the university's resources to the public and promoting the improvement of public taste and knowledge. Extension programs sought to form better citizens amongst the rural population, but they also legitimized new institutions in parts of the province where evidence of government services was scarce. So Reid lobbied the U of A to add art classes to the curriculum for the extension program, and her timing was fortuitous. The U of A had recently added visual arts to its curriculum at the Banff School of Fine Arts and was eager to bring visual arts courses to its community classes. The development of arts as culture were seen as key to fostering the view that Alberta was a progressive and significant province. Donald Cameron convinced H.G. Glide, who was then living in Calgary as the head of the visual arts program at the Provincial Institute of Art and Technology, where he replaced Leighton. He convinced him to travel up to Vegreville. And after the initial meeting, Glide would regularly travel up to the town to instruct Reid and fellow artists. So this is a work that Glide made around that time while in Vegreville. We know that he actually stayed with Laura Evans Reid when he was teaching, so and that's a picture of the town. And this is a photograph of their community art classes. So this is Mr. Glide in front by the train tracks. You can see the landscape. You can see there's no forest for Laura Evans Reid to paint in. That's the sketch club imagine. And this is probably Laura Evans Reid right here in the hat, but that's just typecast. So these classes, according to Glide and Cameron, brought about a vibrant community art scene. In 1950, a news story about community art was broadcast on CBC News Roundup. The story reported that, quote, people in the province of Alberta have caught this sketching bug. All over the province, farmers, housewives, and professional people are buying brushes and palette. It all began in 1937 when Donald Cameron, director of the University Extension Department, and H.G. Blythe, prominent Alberta artist, decided to experiment with the theory. They believed that Alberta people wanted to and could paint. End quote. The enthusiasm for amateur art related to a notion of democratic fairness. Anyone and everyone should be able to participate in the arts. According to visiting artists, such as Andre Beeler, who was employed by the Faculty of Extension, quantity became more important than quality. Enthusiasm for amateur art also related to a discomfort with the notion of an artist. In this context, the professional artist was seen to be an oddity, someone who was disconnected from the life of everyday people. In a bid to develop a regional art that was emblematic of provincial identity, this could have been a liability. Another work by Laura Evans Reid. So in 1947, Blythe published an article about the community art classes in Canadian Art Magazine. And he would write that it was, quote, the function of the Department of Extension to try to open the eyes of these people to the character which is ever apparent to those who wish to see the land as a truly Western form. Laura Evans Reid, in Blythe's eyes, could achieve that goal. According to Blythe, Laura Evans Reid was uniquely qualified to discover this truly Western form because she was the whitest country doctor, because she had the direct experience of traveling through deep snows, because she experienced the, quote, small homes and the struggle for mankind for existence, end quote. It was Reid, according to Blythe, who had a real understanding of her new country. This is what he called Alberta. She, who was qualified to develop a truly regional art and not, to quote, to go back to the CBC News Roundup, some long-haired chap in a garret. So Reid's emergence as an artist occurred in the context of a relatively new province where his leaders prioritized the establishment of a strong provincial identity. Individuals such as Donald Cameron and H.G. Blythe believed that the strong provincial identity was dependent on an art scene unique to the region. And in their view, the establishment of an art scene could occur through community art. According to Blythe, being the wife of a country doctor gave Reid an authentic understanding of rural Alberta and of ethnic minorities such as the area's significant Ukrainian population. Reid could function as a sort of upper middle class envoy who was thus able to develop an art that was a truly Western form. In an undated document, however, Reid describes a far less romantic view of her relationship to her new Canadian neighbors. She is far from being their ally. In her words, quote, once while sketching the premises of a not too pleased Ukrainian peasant whose tumble-down but attractive to artists' home we wished to paint, he objected to us so strenuously that we thought we were in for real trouble. We compromised by giving him the finished picture of his choice. Passing up Mr. Blythe's masterpiece, scorning mine, he chose a precise little drawing by one of the beginners, because it showed his wife's pretty little red geranium in the window. So in addition to belying the sympathetic role that Blythe would have her play, Reid is also rather silent about the development of a regional art for Alberta, which was, according to Blythe, her new country. Her silence may have something to do with the fact that she spent a great deal of time corresponding with critics and dealers in her old country, Ontario. In 1938, she wrote to the National Gallery of Canada inquiring about exhibitions to which she could submit her work. They suggested a number of organizations to which she could apply, including the Canadian Society of Painters and Watercolor and the Canadian Society of Graphic Art. Soon thereafter, she exhibited with both organizations. That same year, she exhibited 21 works in a two-person show at a commercial gallery in Toronto. The exhibition was organized by her daughter, who lived in Toronto. And her daughter, Helen, would almost act as her agent in Ontario, setting up exhibitions and selling work. The next year, we once again participated in the annual exhibition of the Canadian Society of Painters and Watercolor. This time, her submission was night. When the exhibition opened at the Art Gallery of Toronto, it opened next to another exhibition of contemporary American art. The exhibition was reviewed by Graham McInnes in Saturday Night Magazine in an article which compared the Canadian and American exhibitions. McInnes describes Reid as a notable newcomer from Alberta. This would have been an exciting achievement for Reid, who was a reader of Saturday Night Magazine, as early as 1912. In the 1940 review, McInnes goes on to express relief that there appears to be actually little striving for a new style, and consequently he writes, there is both excellent painting and excellent visual interpretation of North American life. So while in Alberta, Glyde would celebrate Reid as an exemplar of regional artists who created a native art emblematic of provincial identity, in Ontario, McInnes would love the absence of such native art. Was this important to Reid? Well, McInnes's article is clipped and pasted in her scrapbook, or what she called her brag book. After McInnes published his article on Saturday night, Reid wrote to him directly, offering photographs of her work for publication. So this is the work that she sent him. It's with very genuine regret that I return your photograph, for the sole reason that they are not clear enough for reproduction, he replied. I like all the paintings as painting, and I think if you could get large, clear photographs, especially of Prairie Graveyard, we would be very happy to run them. So I do not know if Reid follow up with clear photographs. Soon, however, her life would change dramatically. A month after her correspondence with McInnes, Germany invaded Denmark. The period of inactivity on the Western Front, after which Germany had invaded Poland, was over. So the war effort was in full swing. The community art classes stopped, and Reid would begin to devote herself to work with the Red Cross. Her son and son-in-law enlisted in the army. By late 41, Reid's daughter and daughter-in-law moved into the family home with their infants. Reid now had to contend with a hectic home. Finding a place to sit down and paint became quite difficult, not to mention the challenges of affording affordable and good quality art supplies. For his part, McInnes retired his column on Saturday night in 41, and from then on would write art criticism only rarely. Oh, I'm going to finish with this one right here. Though Reid produced little work during the Second World War, she would be one of the few Alberta artists who directly addressed the subject matter of war. A notable exception actually being her mentor and teacher, Glyde. One of her strongest work from this period is Raising Flesh, Blood, and Luck to God. In this work, a tank looms up against a black and red sky, and a soldier lies in the foreground as if he is about to be crushed by the tank. Space is compressed. The machine of war is pitted against the body of man. The work is a condemnation of the war. Here are the nightmares of armed conflict. Reid has shifted her focus to seeking a form of representation which could begin to fathom the war occurring overseas. In conclusion, Laura Evans Reid was one of the earliest artists to engage with modernism in the province of Alberta. Part of the reason that she was able to engage with modernism and participate in major exhibitions in the province was that she actually lived outside of the major urban centers. Her experimentation did not have to contend with, to the same degree as her urban counterparts, with the prevailing conservative attitudes towards art within the province. Again, it's a matter of degree. While living in a rural town posed obvious challenges, it also provided certain benefits. While she may have framed herself as somewhat of an innocent, furthermore, in the matters of art, in fact, Reid was knowledgeable of and invested in contemporary art discourses occurring far away from her hometown. She benefited from the adult art education movement and the openness of art associations, such as the Canadian Society of Painters in Watercolor, which allowed submissions from newcomers such as herself. She was held up as a success story for community art programs in rural Alberta, but the focus on this role, combined with the fact that she had a relatively short career, has meant that her contribution to the early history of modernism in Alberta has been inadequately investigated. Hopefully this paper goes some way to better understand